Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Jersey Nerds Productions. It's the 31 Nights of Horror, as it is the month of October. I don't know, you might be listening to this in November or checking back in on it in March and April, but as we are recording this, it is October 8th at the moment. And so, Tommy, we're going to do the first 6 days of the 31 Days of Horror. I think that it best sets up to do 6 and then 6 and then 6 and then 6 and then 7 to end off. That's 31 days for all you people who can't count particularly well out there.
You just went through the 666 routine, didn't you?
Well, there's an extra 6 in there. The devil might have the thing about repeating that. He's like, that's one too many. I don't know, but if you want to go back and listen to our horror movie draft, that is also uploaded when we did that live. And Tommy, we're not going to repeat next year. It's all new stuff,
all
the time. And I've gotten so many different ideas just from the stuff that we've watched. So we're going to talk about 6 horror movies today. The first one we're going to talk about, we're going to go in order as far as what we watched, and that works out perfectly because It Chapter 2. We have a few different. For those
that haven't followed the long social media at all, to cover the order, we're doing It Chapter 2, The Shining, Carrie, The Popes Exorcist, and The Babadook.
Yes, and this is one of 2. Yeah, 2. Where we have kind of a series. We have It Chapter 2, and then we also have the 3 original Evil Dead movies. Not the although I do have I do have an affinity for the newer Evil Dead movies.
Evil Dead Rise.
We will not be covering, although maybe in years to come, because I am really enjoying this so far. I do have to play a little bit of catch up, but because I'm almost
movie a night.
I'm almost done with the, but I also have a lot of time at the end of the week to kind of play catch up with stuff. Yeah, so the Exorcist is definitely, a lot of these horror movies are pretty short too, but we definitely did not start that way. We started with It Chapter 2, directed by Andy Muschietti, who, the first time I ever heard his name was for the horror movie Mama, which I thought was okay. It wasn't anything special. But a lot of people might know him best from The Flash, which I didn't hate, but a lot of people did. It's not good, but it's also not as bad as I think people made it out to be. And I think that through that movie, you got to see some stuff that would become apparent in It Chapter 2, or at least started out in It Chapter 2. But we'll start with the first one, and again, this isn't going to be certainly not as a much of a deep dive as we do with our Stranger Nerds and Stranger Things.
If we did a deep dive
yeah, we'd be here till 50 o'clock, and that's not a time that exists. So we're gonna definitely go through not the plot points, because I think that we want to avoid talking about spoilers with these movies and more just kind of what we liked, what we didn't, would we recommend it, that type of thing. Tommy, did you see either of these 2 movies in theaters?
Yes, actually, I saw both of them in theaters back in the day when I actually went to the movie theater and had time to do so.
Well, that was before you had a kid.
Yeah.
So, especially with the rated R movie, yeah, that's definitely a no for you right now. I remember going to see this, and the first It was a phenomenon when it came out. It was a cultural thing. I remember that someone tied like a balloon to a sewer grate outside the theater.
Oh, everybody was doing that.
And this was at the time where I had a job at the movie theater for a little bit at a college. It was one of the 3 jobs I had. Don't ever call me lazy. And it wasn't something that like we did. It wasn't something we did to try to promote the movie. Someone just did it. And
no, it's just the cultural phenomenon because the original It back from 1990 was kind of what sparked the whole, fear of clowns for a lot of people, especially in our generation.
And the year before, I don't know if you remember this, there was this weird thing in the fall of 2016 where people were showing up like in the forest dressed as clowns, and it was just very strange. And so this movie kind of came out at the perfect time.
Yeah.
And was just gigantic. And funny enough, it was the first movie that Brandon and I, because this is also when Brandon like just moved into my Brandon too, who sometimes joins us for some of these, had just moved in outside of college, and it was the first time we ever got on a podcast and talked about movies. Was the first It movie, and we both loved it, and I still do. This movie definitely holds up for me personally. I think that it's a perfect kind of it came out around the same time as Stranger Things season 2 as well. So there's definitely a vibe that people were really into around this time. Finn Wolfhard's in both of those, and I think that this movie is Finn Wolfhard's peak. If we're being honest, I think that he is fantastic in this movie.
I would even put on Ghostbusters.
I liked the first one that he was in, but I think as far as his particular acting, this is his peak. Bill Skarsgård as Pennywise is.
So
I don't want to say unrecognizable because that's obvious because of the makeup, but it's insane what he does.
So I have a couple fun facts to burn off on these two movies that relate to the actors.
Okay.
The fact that this was such a big cultural phenomenon, it was actually in development since 2009. They had been.
Yeah, I heard a lot about it for years.
They had a different director involved. They had a whole script laid out, and it just didn't work out. But they had originally had Chloe Grace Moretz casted as Beverly, and Will Poulter was actually casted to play Pennywise. So we actually had a whole different cast back.
Hey man, I think he could have pulled that off. I think he. Yeah, I think he would have been really good, but I'm glad we got Bill Skarsgård. Jaden, I think he changed his last name. Jaden Lieberher, but who now goes by Jaden Martell.
Yep.
He's going to be in a movie coming out soon called Y2K, and I'm glad that he's going to be in something because I haven't seen him in a while, and he's fantastic in this movie as Bill. He's such a character that you want to root for. He's clearly the leader of this group of friends, the losers, after the beginning, the opening scene. Where, again, we're not going to get into spoilers too much as far as these movies go, but everyone knows that Georgie dies at the beginning. That's the opening scene where you meet Pennywise, and it really sets the tone for the movie that, hey, that just because this is a movie with kids in it does not mean it is a kids movie. These kids are going to get absolutely demolished, and bad things are going to happen to them. You're going to explore each character. I think that, this is the first time I saw a lot of these kid actors. Sophia Lillis, who I also really liked in the new Dungeons and Dragons movie that came out last year. She was really good in that, and she's phenomenal in this. Jack Dylan Grazer, who I've heard is kind of a piece of shit, but he's good in this movie. No, I've apparently he's like stuff has come out about him that's not great, but he's very good in this. I really liked the camaraderie that the kids had with each other. There was a good chemistry, and you definitely feel their fear and terror. It's directed in a way that's a lot of fun, and it's a fun movie to look at. The makeup on Pennywise, it's perfect. I just truly adored this movie, and I'm glad that it held up the way that I was hoping that it would, because I loved this movie, and I also saw it among the hype, and there are some times where it's like, well, you see a movie with that much hype and you kind of buy into it a little bit and you're kind of riding it and it feels good, and then you watch it years later and it's not as good as you remember it being. And this wasn't that. I thoroughly enjoyed this.
It was also one of those things where it's obviously based off of Stephen King's book. It's also a remake because they made the film back in 1990 with Tim Curry, which was also very well known. So you have...
Is that a miniseries or a movie?
It kind of goes both ways. I think they classified it as a miniseries, but it was only 2 parts.
Yeah.
So I still classify
I'd heard it referred to as both.
Yeah, I classified it as a movie because, that's what it is. but I think it really holds up. The fact that it did so well and so successfully after as a remake and a book adaptation, you don't get that very often, especially with horror movies. Um, so yeah, it holds up for me. And Bill Skarsgård just really made that character. I like it a lot better than the original.
What would you grade this with whatever scale you use?
Well, what scale do you and Brandon typically do? I know you have
All
a
right,
different. I know you have a different scale system.
So we do some dumb shit, okay? It's very different than your, 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 5 type of thing.
Okay,
Um, we give it a letter grade, but we don't stop there because we
why
got to
not?
be more specific. We've got to give it a percentage point out of like if it's an A, how high of an A is it? If it's
Okay,
a B plus, how high of a B plus is it? So, like for example, I gave this movie an A with a percentage point of 92.99. So it's pretty damn close to an A plus for me.
yeah,
I love this movie. I really, really enjoy watching it.
I will definitely give it an A. I would say probably a 50%.
Okay.
But yeah, it's a phenomenal movie. I know we'll probably have mixed reviews on this one, but I think I like the second one a little bit better.
Yeah, we don't agree on that.
Yeah,
Let's go ahead and get into part two. So part two came out 2 years later, and it was kind of more or less confirmed that it would be a two-parter when at the end it showed up It Chapter 1 at the end
yeah.
of the first movie. And
Well,
also just this movie made, ass loads of money on a pretty small budget, all things considered. So you
also
knew
in
that
the
they were
book,
gonna.
I mean, for those that have read the book that know, it starts the first half is the kids group and the second half is the adults. And the sequel did interesting aspect where they kind of blended the past with the present, so you had both the young actors and the older actors, whereas the original film didn't do that.
So this movie takes place 27 years after the first one did,
Yeah,
and it focuses on the losers, and they come back to Derry to try to finish off Pennywise, right? Because they found out in the first one that this thing comes back every 27 years.
yep,
And so they make an oath like, hey, if it comes back, we'll come back too. And so they do. And everyone was, had their ideas as far as the casting goes for this movie. But once they actually announced it, this was the rare point in time because everyone complains about everything, whether it's good, whether it's bad. Everyone complains about everything. This is one of the first times, one of the only times that the casting for this came out and everyone was just like, wow, that's really good. Jessica Chastain as Beverly was perfect. And I think she was incredible in this movie. James McAvoy as Bill was phenomenal and a great choice. Bill Hader as Richie is kind of the one that everyone points to as the standout
yeah,
for this movie. And I'm guessing that that's something that you agree with.
yep. I mean, when it comes to horror movies, it's not very well known for films to have high paid actors. Horror films are usually very well known for being low budget, unknown actors.
Or if you do, all of the budget is on that.
Yeah,
You have one person and it's like that's it.
yeah. And the fact that they were able to pull such high level actors, and I love McAvoy in this film because he does great with speech work. For anyone who's seen Split, the fact that he pulls off so many
Yeah,
personalities, you
he's
know,
great.
him nailing the stutter, and the fact that he can do an American accent so well. Many people forget that he's not American. I think he's either British or Scottish. Um,
He is Scottish.
Scottish. Yeah, so you don't recognize that. But I'm curious if you know that when they were casting for this movie, they actually gave all the child actors their choice of who they would want to play them as an older self.
Mm-hmm.
they all got their picks, and it would have been a much different cast had they gotten their ways. Did you hear of who any of the rumored cast for who was asked?
No.
So originally, the only two actors that got their choice was Finn Wolfhard and Sophia Lillis. So Bill Hader and Jessica Chastain. Jaden Martell, who plays Bill, wanted Christian Bale. That I think would have been a huge difference in cast.
I can see it though.
Jaden Martell wanted. Oh, I'm sorry,
well,
Jaden Martell.
Yeah.
Chosen Jacobs, who played Mike, wanted Chadwick Boseman, but he was tied up with Marvel and was unable to actually come. Wyatt Oliff wanted Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Then
I don't really see that, and plus that character didn't have that much to do. So, and I'm the biggest Joseph Gordon-Levitt fan, so if he had little to do, I would have been kind of pissed.
Yeah, and then Jeremy Ray Taylor wanted Chris Pratt, and Jack Dylan Grazer wanted Jake Gyllenhaal. So they had a lot of big tier names up there.
I could actually see both of those, especially Chris Pratt. And he definitely has that connection of kind of being the fat kid that got muscular.
Yeah.
But I really
for those that know him back from the Parks and Rec days.
Yeah, which, that wasn't the first thing I saw him in, but once I saw him in it, that kind of became what I know him for.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that the casting on this was perfect, including the Old Spice guy. I thought he was great.
Yes.
As Mike, who definitely has a bigger role in this movie, and you definitely get the vibe of guy that never left this town, and that he's
that one man that
his life
kind of put it on his shoulders to be the anchor for that group.
Yeah. I did not like this movie as much as the first one did, and unfortunately, I loved this movie when it first came out. I really liked it this time around, and I still did really enjoy this. It's way too damn long for me. There are so many flashbacks in this, and I understand why they're there. Like, it makes sense. This movie must have been a bitch and a half to try to edit and put together, and like, all right, what do we cut? What do we leave out?
Well, do you know how long they originally wanted the movie to be?
Did they want it to be like 4 hours?
Yeah, Andy Muschietti had it cut for 4 hours, and that's what he wanted, and they forced him to cut it down.
No. Yeah, no.
That would have been way too long.
It's too long as it is. It's full of flashbacks and things to where it kind of undercuts the pace of the movie.
Yeah.
I think the best scene of this whole movie, and you might disagree with me, there's a scene involving James McAvoy at a circus.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Where I thought that was the best scene in the whole movie for me personally, because it kind of gave you everything that you wanted in something like this, as far as the horror, any gore that you might have wanted, the dramatic impacts tying the second movie to the first movie, great acting on the part of Bill Skarsgård and James McAvoy in that scene. I thought that was the highlight of the movie, but their chemistry I thought was good, but it felt a little bit too much. And feel free to call me a dumb piece of shit for this. That's fine. It felt too much to me like they were written as if their 12-year-old body or their 12-year-old brains were in their 38-year-old bodies. And I understand someone said to me, well, that makes sense because when you hang out with people from your youth, sometimes you can be like that. But like, I'm talking to you right now and I'm not acting like a dumb piece of shit. Like
well, we're also on a podcast talking. We're not in person hanging out having a beer.
I guess so. But I'm not acting like I'm 12 right now, I guess is the point. And a lot of them, particularly, I would say that Eddie acted exactly the same as he did in this one. Eddie and Richie. But with Richie, it didn't necessarily bother me. With Eddie, it was like, okay, so you were the exact same person that you were when you were 12.
Yeah.
That's not good.
So,
and I liked seeing the growth with characters like Ben and Beverly. I really liked those two a lot. I thought that Ben it's really easy to just write someone as you went through this and it affected you in this way and now you're in this position. But with him, I felt it.
So I think it's part of the film as to why they kind of act that way, and they don't really explain it too well, but they they have their kind of memories erased a little bit of the events that led up to the conclusion of the movie. And they even mention like how they don't remember a lot from their time in Derry. So I think after they had left and they kind of parted ways, they sort of forgot about each other. Because I mean, when Mike calls them all, they all were like, "Who? Like, who are you?" So
Yeah.
it's kind of they haven't talked to each other since they left. Is kind of the grasp I'm taking from it. So now that they're all coming back to their hometown and they're seeing each other again, they're kind of like remembering themselves, but they remember the 12-year-old version of themselves. So I
Mhm.
think that's kind of why they act a little bit more immaturely, which I think is why Bill Hader was a perfect casting for this because he's great at playing the serious role, but has a very goofy demeanor about him. But
Yeah. No,
that's my take.
okay. So you liked this more.
I enjoyed the scenes with the older actors more in this film. I enjoyed Bill Hader. I enjoyed the whole scene at the end where they're going through the house and Bill's just interacting and they're like going through the rooms and they just freak out over everything. I think he did a great job at that role.
Mhm.
And of course, McAvoy gave a great performance throughout the entire film, especially the scene we just talked about. I mean, his acting was great, and I think that's kind of what brought a little bit more to the table in this, where you have more experienced actors giving out these roles. But
I liked the performances
story
of the
wise, the
younger
first one
actors
was better.
better, but yeah, no, I'm with you. I gave this a B plus 11.91. So it's a low B plus. I just think that also the ending was kind of anticlimactic and then it just kind of kept going for a little bit
Yeah,
and
well,
it was just awkward.
it's funny because Stephen King actually makes the cameo in this film, and Stephen King is infamous for having bad endings to his books. And they make a joke about that, which is why they have McAvoy's character kind of be a writer that's not good at ending his books. It was kind of a play
Mhm.
on Stephen King, and there's a very supernatural element to it, especially with the book that they don't really touch on too much in the movies, which makes the whole ending very odd with the whole ritual and the whole ceremony they have to do. But yeah, I agree. It just kind of dragged on. And you're just like, the first one ended great. It was really big, climactic ending. Whereas this kind of was just like, all right, I guess this is over now. But
All right,
I would
what's your
say
grade?
I would give it an A. I would say maybe a 20%.
Okay. All right,
It's up
nice.
there. I think the original is better, but I think I had more fun with the sequel, if that makes sense.
All right, let's dive into The Shining now, our third movie directed by Stanley Kubrick. This is also based on a Stephen King book, so we are just on
We have a running trend in this
our
first
first
six.
four are all Stephen King books, which that hey, good
Which,
work,
I
Stephen
think
King.
that's appropriate because the amount of Stephen King books that were turned into horror films is astronomical.
Yeah, that's very true, and not all of them are good. So we're touching on the good ones.
Yeah,
This stars Jack Nicholson, Shelley Duvall, and I knew going in that this was my favorite horror movie of all time. I love it so much. My fiance and I are going as Jack and Wendy for Halloween this year.
very nice.
That's our Halloween costume. So looking forward to that. Um, but this movie definitely did not have the acclaim that it did. First of all, it came out. Do you know this movie came out on May 23rd, 1980? Do you know what other movie came out May 23rd, 1980?
Is the film called Star Wars?
Empire Strikes Back came out May
Yeah, buddy.
23rd,
Oh,
1980.
I'm
So,
good.
what a double feature that would have been if you were able to get that ticket. That was just
This
one
film
for the
had
ages right
everything.
there.
This film had everything working against it. When I was reading into it, because me, I have to do my little research on these things.
That's why we
Uh,
love you.
yeah, this film was critically despised when it
Yeah.
came out, including by Stephen King, who worked with Kubrick throughout the filming process. He even hated what he did to the film, in particular to what he did to Wendy, Shelley Duvall's character. He thought that Kubrick did her an injustice in this film and make her kind of just this weak, pathetic character, whereas in the books she's much different. So yes, I mean you have the creator of The Shining hating on what Stanley Kubrick created, and Stanley Kubrick actually funded personally the rights to make this film. I think it was rumored between 500,000 to 1.5 million that he paid Stephen King to basically get the rights to make this film. So he was personally invested in this.
Yeah, it got 2 Razzie nominations, which for those of you who don't know, that's kind of the opposite of the Oscars, but they're not very good at their job.
It's
They just
basically if
kind of,
it's a bad movie celebration.
yeah, and this got nominated for worst director, Stanley Kubrick of all damn people,
Yep.
and worst actress for Shelley Duvall, which her performance in this movie has really grown on me because I think for what she's asked to do, she does a really good job, but Jack Nicholson in this movie gives one of my favorite performances of all time. I love Jack Nicholson and just how he just goes for it.
Yes.
In this movie. It's so much fun to watch, but you also feel the terror when he's going after his family, because this is about a guy who's asked to look over a hotel. Yep. And he's a writer, and it's like, hey, look after the hotel. If anything comes up, just take care of it. It's gonna be about 5-6 months, something like that. You've got a ton of food and stuff. You're taken care of. You're good. Just a lot of this job is just going to be kind of hanging out.
It's not just hanging out. It's pure isolation because it's an isolated hotel in the winter. I think it's in the Colorado mountains.
Yes.
So you're not going to have any. It's kind of like COVID. You're not going to be able to see anybody for months, and you're stuck in the house with whoever you're with, and you just have to make it work. Mm-hmm. And Jack Nicholson gives a great performance because he's very good at giving the serious but psychotic personality in a lot of his roles. He's either really psychotic and mean, or he's just serious and angry, which is definitely what you need for this character. But fun fact, do you know who was originally wanted to be casted in this role?
Who wanted to be cast, or who they got?
Who Stanley Kubrick wanted for this film?
Who do you want?
He wanted Robert De Niro, who they was told was not psychotic enough. And on the flip that, they also wanted Robin Williams, who they said was too psychotic, which I thought was pretty funny. The fact they thought Robin Williams was too psychotic for this role.
I actually think Robin Williams could have done a really good job with this.
Right?
Because Robin Williams
is a fan. Robin Williams would have been great.
No, I could see them both, but no one ever could have done a better job than Jack Nicholson does here.
Yep.
I think that Jack Nicholson is phenomenal. I think the scenes with him at the end with Shelley Duvall are obviously iconic. They go down in horror movie history, whatever. I love the scenes of him at the bar with the bartender. It's just great stuff all the way around. Yeah, if you have not seen this movie, you need to change that as soon as possible.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing with this. I watched it for the first time when I was 20 or 21. And I turned it off 40 minutes in because I was just impatient. And I was like, okay, so the movie is no plot. I'm done. And then I came back to it about 3 or 4 years later because I knew I needed to finish it. I needed to actually watch the movie. I couldn't just say, oh, I didn't like it. I didn't even watch a third of the movie. And then I watched it and I'm like, this is just a classic that I love and I can't wait to watch it again. And the funny thing is, and I swear I'm not making this up, Sarah and I watched this movie, and this was after I had shoulder surgery. So I kind of just wanted movies to watch
Yeah.
while I was, in the sling, hooked up to the ice machine, all that stuff. The second it was the day after. The day after we watched the movie, I get a notification on my phone, and I had no knowledge of it. Trailer for the Shining sequel, Doctor Sleep, and I'm like,
Yeah.
wait, what? They're making a sequel to this? The movie I just saw yesterday? Like, it was a very strange coincidence. And next year, spoiler alert for next year, Doctor Sleep will be on the list. That's another movie I
Yes.
do really like, and I think that it makes sense to have that next year. Because
I feel
that
like
follows
next year's gonna have a lot of sequels involved, I think.
for a movie called The Shining. It doesn't really focus too much on the actual quote unquote shining that Jack Nicholson's kid Danny has in this movie. It's kind of something that, if you really look back on it at the end of the movie, it's like that really didn't have too much of a point of being there. But
And that was one of the problems Stephen King had with the portrayal of the film,
okay,
because again, Stephen King loves to throw supernatural stuff into his books, and that's very hard to portray into films, especially
yeah,
films coming out in those times where it's requires a lot of special effects, and they spent a lot of money. I mean, they spent an insane amount of money just on that blood elevator scene alone.
mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think this film focuses more on the aspect of the decay into madness than they do on the actual supernatural stuff, which makes it a little bit weird when you're watching it when you don't know the context of what the hell's going on, because all the interactions the kid has, you're like, what the fuck is happening? Is the hotel haunted? Is something else going on? You don't really know for sure if you don't have that little dialogue with the groundskeeper or chef. I forget what his actual role in the hotel was, but
I don't know what it was either,
the
but
other actor who
he was the head chef, yeah.
yeah. So the only other character
Halloran.
there that has the shining in him, if you don't get that dialogue, you would have no idea what the hell's going on. But I'm glad they made Doctor Sleep, because that actually brings it more into perspective. And when you rewatch The Shining, a lot of things make more sense. But
I gave this an A plus, 13.38%.
I gave it a B plus. I'd say 80%, because I love this film, but it's not scary for me at all.
You don't
And
love a B plus.
I
You
just
like a B plus. You don't love a B plus. Stop. Knock it off.
I don't know. I enjoy watching this film a lot, but it's one of those films you really have to sit down, because it is a
Yeah, it is.
slow burn for that first half of the film. And I was the same way. It took me a long time to finally actually sit down and watch the whole movie through, because it was one of those films I always saw it on AMC during Halloween season. I would turn it on at a random point and watch it, but I never actually sat down all the way through and watched it until.
Well, it's 2.5 hours long, so a lot of these movies we're going to talk about are shorter than that. I mean, It Chapter 2 is almost 3 hours, so,
Yeah, that
it
was a
seems a
long
lot
one.
shorter comparatively speaking. But let's talk about something that was a lot shorter, and that's Carrie. For those of you
Oh,
that need to be told,
Carrie.
1976's Carrie, because there was a remake in 2013, and I actually saw that years ago. I think I didn't see it in theaters, but I saw it close to around that time, and I
Yep.
did not like it. I thought it was pretty bad. Um, it just seemed very rushed and poorly acted. It's got Chloe Grace Moretz, who isn't in any of the movies we've talked about today, but it's somehow come up twice.
Yep.
And Julianne Moore. I think that the mom had a little bit of a bigger role in that. They tried to make it a little bit longer. I might be completely misrepresenting it. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but this is directed by Brian De Palma, starring Sissy Spacek, Piper Lowry, John Travolta is in
Yeah,
this. Who
this was one of the first times I had watched this film all the way through, and
This was the
I
first time I'd seen it.
I had completely forgot that John Travolta was even in this film. So that was a bit of a surprise for me when I saw him and I was pull up in the car. I was like, when the fuck was John Travolta in a horror movie?
Yeah, no, this was
I
John Travolta. I don't know if it was necessarily his like.
did look it up. This was his second actual film created. He was in a few TV shows before this, but this was definitely his leaping off point in his career, because right after this, he was in not Dirty Dancing.
Okay, this came out a year before Saturday Night Fever, and
Saturday
then
Night Fever.
2 years before Grease.
Yep.
So his big break was coming, but this was probably the first time a lot of people had seen him.
Yeah.
I did not know that. Do you know who played the gym teacher, or Miss Collins?
No.
Betty Buckley. And if I just say that name to you, you're probably like, who the fuck is that?
That's exactly what I'm thinking of.
So this is the second time that Split came up. Do you know his the psychiatrist, or the therapist in Split?
Yeah.
That's her.
Ah, no shit.
Yeah. So I mean, this movie came out 40 years before that. So obviously she looks very different.
I'm glad they all found work, because watching this film, I was like, I don't know any of these names except for John Travolta.
Well, Sissy Spacek. Have you not heard of her? I mean,
No,
she's been in.
Not a name I was familiar with.
She was in Coal Miner's Daughter. She was in. She was in a bunch of stuff.
I never saw that movie.
Badlands. I mean, she was in that before Carrie. So yeah, no, she's been in a ton of different things. And I'm looking at a picture of her from when she was in her early 60s, and she somehow looks exactly the same, just older. No, she's the exact same smile that she does in this movie. And Carrie's a movie about this woman or this girl, this high school teenage girl who lives with her mom, and her mom is a very, 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 I don't want to say devout. I don't want to say devout Christian, because that's a disgrace to people that are like religious and like recognize where the limits are. She's insane when it comes to this stuff, to like the point where, I don't want to give anything away. Everything's a sin. Everything is unforgivable.
Going up to strangers saying, I hope you find God.
Yeah, just like walking into people's houses and telling them about like Christ and stuff.
Or treating her child like fucking Harry Potter and having a praying closet.
Yeah, exactly.
That was a bit extreme.
And I know I know that people were a little bit more religious and such. This movie came out nearly 50 years ago. But it's so extreme that even people back then were like, all right, damn, can you leave me alone, please?
Yeah.
So clearly this has stunted Carrie's social development, and she's not popular. There's an incident with her, and she gets her period towards the beginning of this movie. She doesn't know what it is, so she thinks she's like dying or something, and the other kids are just like really cruel to her about it. And so the gym teacher, played by Betty Buckley, is like, all right, I'm gonna punish the hell out of these kids because they can't possibly think that what they did is okay. One of the more popular of the group is like, the most popular of the group is like, I'm not taking this. I'm planning some revenge. And another one does quite the opposite. It's like, hey, I want my boyfriend to take Carrie to the prom, and let's kind of turn this around a little bit because I feel really bad about this. And meanwhile, Carrie is discovering that she might have telekinesis, which just sounds like it came right the fuck out of nowhere. But
and that's kind of how it comes off in the film too, just random little moments here and there of strange thing happening.
If I will give any credit to the 2013 movie, is I think that they weave that into the plot a little bit more. Like, they spend more time on it, whereas this, it's just like you go a long time and completely forget that has anything to do with what's going on in this movie until you definitely remember that it does. I really liked this movie. It was one that at the beginning, I'm like, all right, where are we going with this? What's the deal?
But I know this went on. You and I are divided on.
Yes, this is the one that we are going to disagree about the most. But I feel like the reasons aren't too, like, we're not going to be here for 45 days discovering the reasons why. I'll let you go ahead and get started first so we can end on a more positive note. Why did this movie kind of fall short for you?
So as a film, I can appreciate it as a classic. I see what they were doing. I do enjoy it. I will admit it took me 3 times to get through this movie. I fell asleep twice during the first half of the film. I just could not. It just wasn't doing anything for me. And I finally finished it because I also kind of knew what the whole plot was. So I knew what was going to happen. but it wasn't scary in the slightest. Which for me, for a horror film, I need some sort of jump scare, something spooky. This was just a kid that's been sheltered her entire life, experiencing womanhood and being bullied by annoying little cheerleader girls. So it didn't really do it for me. But I would say I would give it a C minus,
Oof.
20%.
That's rough.
Yeah,
That's rough.
it's just it's a good film story wise, but just for me watching it, it's just boring.
This movie's the perfect length as far as I'm concerned. It's 98 minutes. So you get in, you get out, and I
Yep.
did not feel that runtime. I felt like this movie moved. I loved where this movie went. I thought that Sissy Spacek was really good as Carrie in this movie. I thought that she was fantastic. My only thing with this is I feel like this is kind of misrepresented. Like, I get why this is called a horror movie, but for like 95% of this movie, it is absolutely not a horror movie.
Not until you get to the ending where crazy shit
And
goes down.
even then, you might even describe that as more of an action movie than a horror movie, depending on how you look at it.
I would classify this as a religious thriller.
Yeah, I think that
Like, I don't know
I
how
think you're
else
definitely
to
within your right to
classify
do
it,
that.
but
Yeah,
that's what I would say it would be.
I gave it an A minus 29.76.
Wow.
I really like this movie, and I could see myself watching this again. I had a lot of fun with this. Yeah, I'm glad that I watched this. Next up is one that I'm not gonna spend a ton of time on, but I don't know if you had seen this movie. It's the Pope's Exorcist, directed by
Yep.
Julius Avery, who I was kind of excited for this movie when it came out last year. Came out
Yep.
in April of 2023. And I was kind of looking forward to it because, all right, yeah, Russell Crowe in a horror movie. All right, that's kind of, let's see where this goes.
Yep.
He was in a movie this year called The Exorcist, or sorry, The Exorcism, that, should let you know that no, Russell Crowe just doesn't care anymore because that movie's awful. But it was directed by the guy that made Overlord. I don't know if you'd seen that.
I haven't, but I know the concept of it.
It's a movie that I wasn't a very big fan of, but I did leave going, I want to see what this director does next, because this guy at the very least has an interesting way of visually telling stories. And none of that shines through in The Pope's Exorcist. It's a movie about you've seen it a million and a half times.
I mean, come on, the beautiful scenic visuals of a aged Russell Crowe riding across the countryside on a Vespa. Beautiful.
The only
beautiful
thing
stuff.
I thought that Russell Crowe was really good in this. I did like Russell Crowe in this movie. I had fun with that. I liked seeing the kid talk shit. Because it's this kid that's possessed, and what was his name? Henry. And he's possessed, and he spends the whole time just talking shit to this guy. And I'm not gonna lie, it's really funny. But they go on, and this guy's like a trusted exorcist from, he's the Pope's exorcist, so he's definitely, his word carries some weight. And they kind of, as they go on, they kind of learn some deep dark secrets about the church and the church's history.
Yep.
And I won't really get too deep into that, because a lot of the other movies, like for example, most people that know the movie Carrie know what happens in the movie Carrie, to the point where it's on the damn poster. So this movie, less so. It's been out for less time, and I know that this was your pick, so I think that you either really wanted to see it or already knew that you really liked it. So I'll give you the floor.
I didn't love it. It was just one of those films. When I saw it come out, I was like, all right, Russell Crowe is just back in his Italian game between playing Zeus in Thor. Now
That's not Italian. That's not Italian.
It's close.
It's Greek.
Greek, Roman, in that Rome. But now he's playing Exorcist. He's in another Exorcist film, like you mentioned. He's also going to be in the sequel to this film.
They're making a sequel to this?
Oh yes, they are.
I feel like I had heard that somewhere.
And they have this is going to be like the Conjuring films, where they can make a lot of movies off of this character, because he actually the character Gabriel Amorth is the actual character in real, like he's an actual person in real life.
I did not know this, but
He was,
guess who was nominated for a Razzie?
was it Russell Crowe?
Russell Crowe and Franco Nero in this movie were both nominated for Razzies, which I think is, I think that's just ridiculous. Neither one of, like, I might not be the biggest fan of this movie, but I'll go ahead and C plus 4.68. I am very much like I could take it or leave it with this.
Yeah,
but nowhere near Razzie worthy.
no,
Get the hell out of
definitely.
here. How many movies did they see last year?
Russell Crowe is too legendary of an actor to give a Razzie, but I
And
mean,
he's
he's what makes this film
he's
entertaining.
having a great time in this movie.
Yeah, and that's what I love seeing. Like when actors just kind of get to that point in their career where they have so much success, they're just like, you know what, let's just take random fucking roles and see what happens. And I feel like that's what this was for him. But I think now he's on this harder term where he's like, all right, this is kind of fun characters to play, that he's doing all these different Exorcist movies. But yeah, it's funny because I saw him in the trailer and I was like, this can't be an actual thing. Russell Crowe playing an Exorcist, but it was. So I was like, I have to see it. And it's just a fun, stupid movie because there's so many Exorcist movies. So you all kind of have this, you know what you're getting when you go into this kind of film. And it was just entertaining for me. So I would say I give it a C plus as well, about 50%.
Anytime a Russell Crowe anything comes up, I just have to say, watch The Nice Guys.
Oh,
It's
love
a
that.
fantastic movie, and far too few people have seen it. And it's one of the funnier movies that I've ever seen. And Russell Crowe, as well as Ryan Gosling, but really, I think Russell Crowe is just fantastic in that.
Yeah.
So if you're gonna watch a Russell Crowe movie, and he's been in a lot lately, like he was in a movie called Land of Bad that I thought was fine. It was like a C minus. It wasn't awful, but it wasn't good. He was in a movie called The Exorcism, which was awful and terrible. And he probably will get a Razzie nomination for that performance, and I won't even necessarily contest it. And then Craven the Hunter comes out later this year, which, against all hope, I'm
Yeah.
expecting to have a fun time with it.
Given Sony's track record, I'm sure it's not going to be great.
That's the thing. Yeah,
I'm holding out for hope. I would love for that movie to be fun, but
all right, let's close this thing out with the Babadook. This was a 2014 release Australian movie, Tommy. This is an Australian movie, and you definitely can tell it's written all over the movie. Directed by Jennifer Kent, written by Jennifer Kent, based on her 2005 short film. And this was a movie that I had heard some tremendous things about for years, but I kind of thought that it was going to be one of those more, I don't want to say pretentious, slow-paced horror movies that nothing really happens in, but I kind of thought it was going to be one of those pretentious, slow-paced movies that nothing really happens in. And I gotta say, I really enjoyed this movie. For one, it's an hour and a half long. So again, even if nothing happens, it's a concise nothing happens.
Short movie, yep.
But this movie, I think it kind of grabs you from the get-go because it's about a mom that has the single worst fucking kid that I've ever seen in a movie. Like this kid single-handedly had me going, wow, maybe I shouldn't be a parent, to the point where if you follow me on Letterboxd, my review of this movie was, and I quote, yeah, maybe I shouldn't be a parent.
I laughed a lot when I saw that comment. But just for the listeners so they understand, the actual synopsis of this movie off of IMDb is: a single mother and her child fall into a deep well of paranoia when an eerie children's book titled Mr. Babadook manifests in their home. And I found a lot of ties with this film to The Shining, in the sense that it's not as long as The Shining, but the same concept of, you have this character who's basically in isolation with her child throughout this movie. Granted, they're still going out and doing things, but she's so tied to this child because he caused so many problems. She's kind of stuck with him. She doesn't have much support from anybody, including her family, who is just complete shit to her in this film. But she just gets to the point where she literally goes insane and on a killing spree, similar to Jack Nicholson's character. And that's where that film took a great turn for me, and I really enjoyed the ending to it because, yeah, like you said, this kid's a fucking terror. And the whole first half of the film, I'm like, all right, is this just like a bad parenting movie? Like, what is this supposed to be scary? And when things start to happen towards the second half of the film, like, okay, I know exactly where they're going with this film. And it it was crazy. And the ending I know is supposed to be contradictory, like, or not contradictory, wrong word, but kind of the take your pick as to if it was an actual possession or if it's psychological type ending.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of up to the audience. And the director even said like it was she wanted the ending to be up to the audience to say, hey, kind of pick your own ending as to why it happened.
Mm-hmm.
Which I kind of like it because I could see it from both ways.
I didn't even necessarily really care about why it happened. It was more just like I didn't really care about the specifics. It was more just kind of the tone the movie set and the way it was making the characters feel and how it was having an effect on them. That's what mattered a little bit more to me. I thought that Essie Davis was tremendous in this movie as the mom, to
Yeah.
where the movie actively made me tired because this woman, I just the whole time I'm like, just please get some sleep. Like lock this
Yes.
kid in the refrigerator or something. Just like get this kid some get get some sleep because
Well, she does
but
get to a point, and like not to spoil much, but like you get to the point where she goes to the doctor for help and says, "I need sedatives for my kid." Like she drugged her kid because she needed sleep.
yeah.
She had no support system.
She's like, no, I gave my kid tranquilizers, and it's like, I mean, I can't even necessarily say I blame you because,
Yeah.
yeah, it was rough. This movie puts you in a fantastic, not fantastic, but it's a fantastic job of putting you in her headspace and making you feel like you're going crazy along with her.
Yeah.
And I've got to give major credit to the actors, but especially the director. Jennifer Kent did a tremendous job here, and I know that she's only made one other movie that I know of, at least as far as like since this, called The Nightingale. And I know that it got an extremely limited release back in 2019. Apparently, it's a really violent, messed up movie, but I've heard good things about it. Um, I'd like to see this director do more. I don't know why this wasn't more of a stepping off point for her because this movie got a lot of attention. I've been
Oh yeah.
hearing great things about it for years. I know that you texted me while you were watching it, and you thought that it was something else. You thought that it was a Monster Calls,
Yeah.
which is another movie I've heard great things about that I haven't seen. So I'd love to watch that at some point. But from what I know about that movie, I see where you could get the connection between those two.
Yeah. It was definitely a big twist for me because starting off this film, I was like, this is not what I remember. This kid is not the same kid from this movie.
And this is also the definition of a psychological horror movie,
Mm-hmm.
where I know that we've got more stuff coming later as far as like if you want your slashers and that type of thing, then that you're more quote unquote traditional
Yeah.
Halloween movies. Then you've got your Texas Chainsaw Massacres, your Friday the 13th, your Nightmare on Elm Streets, your Halloweens. That's all coming. But definitely the stuff that we've talked about so far has been a little bit more psychological, and I think that was a good way to start things off.
Yep.
I know that it was kind of, I don't know, you did a good job of putting in order to these.
I
That
wanted to start this off with a little bit, everybody's got the clown fear. It's a newer franchise. Then we go back to the older classics, then jump back a little bit to the modern, get a little taste of like a little, exorcism, a little bit of haunting. And then obviously if you want to lead into what our next six films will be.
Well, I'll go ahead and give my grade for this first. I got an A minus 13.93. Very similar range to Carrie. I think that Carrie just kind of had a bit more of an even pace as things went along.
Yeah. I'm gonna give it a B, 90%.
Okay.
Definitely one of the better films on this list, but it could have been a lot scarier for me, but I definitely enjoyed it, and the kid definitely knocks it down for me because listening to that kid for an hour and a half was pure torture.
Yeah, I don't know how much I'm going to come back and rewatch this, but
Yeah,
it's definitely a good one-time watch.
Watch.
Yeah. All right, so the next 6, when we come back, we've got The Exorcist, which some proclaim to be the king of all horror movies. Smile, which, hey, we've got a sequel for that coming out pretty soon.
Yep.
Jeepers Creepers, which I have never actually seen. I've never seen The Exorcist either, so
Oh, you haven't?
no. The Strangers, which I actually saw for the first time like 3 months ago, so I will be rewatching that. Jennifer's Body, which I have not seen all of, but I'm excited to watch that. And then I can't say the name of this movie without saying it like this because I remember. Okay, just brief story time. Okay, just very very brief. I remember me and a buddy of mine we wanted to go to a movie. All right, this is before I was like going to movies like religiously, 2009. And we ended up going to see Terminator Salvation. Decently fun movie. Nothing great, but fun enough. And I remember his mom was going through and was on Fandango looking at the movies that were out. And she was like, all right, Angels and Demons, Terminator Salvation, Star Trek.
Oh my god.
Drag Me to Hell. And the way she said it will just stick with me for the rest of my life. Like, she was like, what the hell kind of name of a movie? Drag Me to Hell. So
Honestly, it sounds more like a rock song.
Yeah. So that's just how I have to say it for the rest of my life. I will never not think of that movie without seeing my friend Chris's mom just drag me to hell. So
this is a nice set of movies. We have 2 films you haven't seen and 2 I haven't seen. I have not seen Jennifer's Body or Drag Me to Hell.
I have the only one of those that I have seen are Smile and The Strangers.
Okay. Well, Jeepers Creepers and Drag Me to Hell both have the infamous Justin Long in it. His brief stint in horror films.
I saw a Justin Long horror movie not too long ago called Barbarian. That was a decent time.
Oh, that's right. I did forget about that one.
Yeah, okay. If you haven't seen that, it's what that might have to be on one in the future because that is just a bananas horror movie. I'm not even necessarily sure that I love it, but it was a one-time watch
for me. But yeah, that was a batshit crazy movie.
I respect the hell out of it, but I don't. Yeah, it's insane. But we'll get to that when the time comes, Tommy. Hey, that's 6 nights of horror down, 25 more to go. I'm excited to get to watch some of these and talk about them with you. So if you have watched any of these or have any recommendations,
message us
let us know. Media. Yeah, we'd love to keep it in mind. So
Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Letterboxd.
So stay tuned because we will definitely be back for nights 7 through 12 of horror. Tommy, thanks for going through these with me, and I'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Stay spooky out there.